Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Saturday morning. Some places it's a little wet, and we're praying that you're staying safe. My name is Walisha Wilson. I'm the founder of New Life Second Chance Outreach, and we're here with Tom Arjay from the DeKalb County Library, who has been presenting us with these awesome and dynamic and very, very informative financial tracking workshops through his Spark training program. Today, we are going over session 5, which is logics and functions. And as you know, as a business owner or a soon to be business owner, tracking your finances is very, very, very important when it comes to your end of the year taxes, as well as when you're trying to apply for funding. And a very easy way, a lot of people are, everybody's not really inept with, good with using QuickBooks and a lot of these more these software that has a higher learning curve. Myself personally, I prefer Google Sheets, but I myself am a business owner and I wanted to actually I love taking these classes because would love to like excel. And a lot of these places charges hundreds and hundreds of dollars for these trainings. And so we're very glad to be able to offer these to you for free through Tom's help and the partnership with the DeKalb County Library. So again, we're on session 5. We have 2 more sessions to go. If for some reason you missed last week's session or any of the other sessions, they can be found on our YouTube page. And you can get that page from our website at www.nlscoinc.org. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. Thank you all so much for joining us. Put in the chat where you're joining us from. We've had folks from Texas, we've had folks from Connecticut and Virginia, as well as right here in Georgia. So wherever you are, it's still the same information that can be used wherever, and we're glad we're able to support you with this. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Tom and get ready for our worksheets and some learning logics and functions. Thank you, Tom.
All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. So what we're going to do today, as Alicia was saying, we're looking at formulas and functions. And really what the intent of this is to show you how you can add, subtract, divide, find percentages, all of those things we do without having to use a calculator. And then we're going to talk today. So the hope is today we're going to discuss first, we're going to talk about what formulas, functions, and operators are. So for some of this, we may be going back to math class when we were kids. And I'll say right now too, there are shortcuts I'm going to show you that are going to be helpful just to save you some time. But I'm also a believer too that to show you how we can write out the formulas as opposed to going directly to that shortcut. So we're going to do both today. Then ultimately, of course, when you do this on your own, it's going to be up to you what you prefer to do. We're going to talk about, as I just said, talk about entering and editing formulas, because a lot of times too, I'm going to show you today too how we can copy and paste formulas. But sometimes when we do that, it's going to be, you're going to have to go back in and edit some of that information just because of, we'll talk more about that when we get to that point. But really, it's just a minor little tweak you'll have to do. We'll talk about calculating sums. We're going to talk about calculating percentages. And we're going to talk about averages, calculating averages, minimums, and maximums. I apologize. My seat just fell down on me. There we go. Okay. And then lastly, as I said too, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks that will save you some time when you're doing this. Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen here. I'm going to bring up our spreadsheet that we're going to work with today. 1 second here. All right. Okay, so this is a budget. This would be like a household budget, but then you could pretend to this could be your office budget in terms of rent, expenses, payroll expenses, all the things you might have with your business. But as I said, for today, we're going to use a spreadsheet that's like a household budget. So a formula, basically, we're going to talk about formulas and functions. So a formula allows you to perform calculations using a combination of numbers, symbols, and operators. So for example, I'm gonna show you this in detail here, but let's pretend like I want to add in January, the income between myself and my spouse. So to do that, I'm just going to show you over here in just this cell here. This would be an example of a formula, and it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to put in, you always start, whether it be a formula or a function, you always have to start with the equal sign. So I'm going to put in equal, okay? And remember too, when we're dealing with Excel or with Google Sheets, we always, when we refer to the cell we're working with, we refer to the column first and then the row. So in this case, I'm going to add B11 and B12. So I can type in B11, and then I'm going to do a plus sign, and then B12. Okay, and then you hit enter to tell Excel that you're done with entering your formula. Okay, and we get $6,000, which would be correct. Okay, we could also subtract. You can do any arithmetic, any mathematical function in these cases too. So for example, if I wanted to subtract B11 from B12, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Do the minus sign for subtract. Okay, we get 1,000, right? So that's an example of a formula. All right, let me go and clear this out. Okay, so a function, the difference between a function and a formula basically the definition is a predefined uh, formula that performs a specific calculation. We call these arguments in a particular order. So for example, if I wanted to add up, and we're going to do this as well too in detail, let's say if I wanted to add up all of these categories for January. So I could go in and I could do this. I could do equals, what is that? B16 plus B17 and so on and so forth. But clearly that's going to take a lot of time, right? And if you're dealing with a spreadsheet where you might have 100 entries, you don't want to have to do this over and over and over again. So the way we can add up a group of numbers, like a predefined range, is what we're going to do is we're going to do it. We would have a function. Okay, so once again, we start up the function with the equal sign. Okay, and then we type in, you can do, there's literally, I believe, like thousands of formulas you could use in Excel or Google Sheets. I'm sorry, thousands of functions we can use in Google Sheets or Excel. Today, we're just going to look at a few of them. But so, for example, if I wanted to add up B16 through B26, what I would do is I would type in sum, and you can see Excel kind of enters it for you as you're typing it in. And then we have to do our operators here. So we do sum, and then we're going to do I call this a bracket. You may call it something different. But on your keyboard, it's the 9 and the 0. I put the bracket there, and then I'm going to put the cell that I want to work with, B16. Then and then I want to do all these cells here. So instead of doing them individually, I can tell Excel that I want to do B16 through B26 by putting a colon, and then I'm going to do B26. And you can see as I'm typing that, you can see right here that's highlighting this column that I want to add. Okay, so when I'm doing this, I can look at my spreadsheet and see this is definitely what I want to do. And then I'm going to tell Excel that I'm done with this function by putting the end of the operator by putting an end bracket here. And then once again, we hit enter to get our calculation. And what did we get? Oop, did that work? Okay, let me try it one more time. Equals sum. All right. B16 through B26. Okay, there it works. We have $3,950. And as I said, we will go through this in detail in a minute here, but this gives you an idea. So remember, when we talk about formulas and functions, a formula is just a very basic, you're adding up maybe two cells. Okay, a function, we're doing a whole range, and that's just the difference. Okay, and then the operators are these things right here. We have the sum, the brackets, the cell range we're working with, and then the end bracket. So if you remember, what is it, the calculus or pre-calc or geometry from when we were kids, it's kind of the same thing. You have to put things in a certain order to add them up. Okay. All right. So some of the functions or some of the Functions that we have and we're going to work with today. I mentioned the sum, which is going to be adding. Okay. We also have count, which is going to summarize the number of items. So say, for example, on a spreadsheet, you might have 1,000 entries, right? And then you might have some blank rows in there. So you want to know the exact count. So rather it's going through and doing the math between column, row 1 to row 980. I mean, it'd be pretty straightforward, but then you could do a count to see how many entries you have. Okay. Average, I'm going to type that in. Okay. Average would give us the average of our values. Okay. So we're trying to figure out how much money per year you're spending on, say, paper or printer ink or rent for your office. You can figure out the average by using this function. Okay. And then last two we're going to look at are max, which finds the largest value. So for example, if you're trying to find in which month or what your highest expense is, you could use the max function. And then minimum is just the opposite, where it's the smallest value. So once again, if you're trying to find for example, what your least expensive item is in your business, you could use the minimum function. Okay. Then as I said too, we can do any arithmetic operator in Excel or Google Sheets. We can do addition, which I mentioned is the plus sign. We can do subtraction, which is the minus sign. Okay, then multiplication. So for example, if I wanted to multiply these two categories in January, just do it here as an example. I do equal, was it B11? And then the multiplication feature is the star, which I'm trying to find here. It's on your keyboard. It's on the shift to 8. All right. Then B12. Okay. All right. And then real quickly too, when we see these pound signs, that's Excel trying to tell you that the number is going to be too big for our column. So the easiest fix for that is just to make that column bigger or widen it out. So I just go here, if you remember from our basis class, we go here to the top of the column, and then you notice here that I have an arrow. Then when I go to the side, it goes to a cross. And that's telling me now I can adjust this column. So I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. And then you see here that the number, because it was too large to appear in that cell. So it went from being, for example, from being a pound sign, all those pound signs, to being our value that we got. Okay. And then as we're working, putting formulas in, you'll see those pound signs. So once again, if you get a pound sign, it's not a big deal. It's just Excel or Google Sheets telling you to adjust the size of your column. All right. And then lastly, division, which we'll do a little bit with today. To do division, I'm just going to edit this real quick here. Division is the backslash. Okay. And I'm going to put in B12. Hit enter again. Okay. Hold on. That didn't do what I wanted it to do. Or did it? Okay. But that didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, but that's, remember the backslash is we want to divide. That's what we would use. Okay. All right. Okay. So what we're going to do now, okay. Give me 1 second to catch up here. Okay. So then, okay, we're going to talk about copying and pasting here. Okay. So when we do our activity, we're going to do our activity here in a second here. Believe we're going to talk about an activity sheet here. Yeah, so we're going to talk about copying and pasting formulas as well too. We'll go through this sheet together. But when we copy a formula, we're going to use the copy feature here. Remember, we call this part of Excel or any other Microsoft Office product. This part right here, we call it the ribbon. Okay. And it's always going to start with the home tab right here. But when we go to the home tab, you see the copy and the paste. to copy a formula, and we'll do this together, we just go to click on copy, or we could use Control C, and then we'll go to the paste. And you'll see in a second here when we do this, when we copy, the paste feature right here will become yellow and highlighted. And I'll show you how that looks in a second here. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into our activity. So we're going to do activity 1, and you're welcome to do this along with me. You're welcome to watch, do whatever you like. Okay, so we went ahead and opened our file here. And then as we're going to start with in the January column, like we did a second ago here, we're going to click into cell B13, okay, for total income. Okay, and we're going to enter our basic formula here where we're going to add these two totals here. So once again, to do that, remember from our basics class, you can either go directly into the cell and type in the formula, or we can go up here to what they call the formula bar. I prefer, when I'm working with formulas and functions, because they're larger numbers, I prefer to work from here so I can actually see it. You could also do it down here. There's no right or wrong way. This is a personal preference. Okay, so I'm going to type in equals, once again, to start our formula. And then I'm going to type in B11, and then I'm going to add B12. Okay, and once again, we can see that it is highlighted right here. So it's telling us, it's indicating to me this is what we're going to add up. Okay, and then I hit enter, and we get $6,000. Okay, so another thing we could do, I'm going to show you another trick we can use here. So I'm going to go back into the cell, and remember, I know I'm in the cell because it's highlighted with green. I'm going to re-enter it again, and I'm going to show you a trick that you can use when you're working with the cells. Instead of typing it in, let's say you didn't, like, say you had a massive spreadsheet, and visually you're just, trying to, not struggling, but you're trying to remember, is it G, is it H, is it 11, or is it 12? You can click onto the cells that you want to add. So rather than typing it, remember I started with the equal. I'm going to start with B11, and see it's highlighted. It's telling me that's what I'm working with right now. And then I'm going to add, and then I'm going to click on B12. Okay, so once again, you can either enter the cells by hand, or you can click onto the cells. As we talked about, there is no right or wrong way to do this. When I'm doing these, I tend to go back and forth between clicking on the cells or entering them manually. Okay, so once again, it's your personal preference. It's kind of akin to using the keyboard shortcuts that a lot of us use, like Control C for copy, Control V for paste. You can use them. You don't have to use them. There's no right or wrong way to do it. So I'm going to hit enter again. Okay. So we have $6,000. Okay, now what I want to do, I could go in and enter, I could go into each column here and enter a formula, okay? But I could do that, but we're working with, what is it? 1, 2, 3, working with 12 cells here. So that's going to take some time. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to copy this formula into all these cells here. So to do that, what I'm going to do is, okay, I'm going to click into the cell, and we have a white cross. Okay, and if you remember from our Excel class or some of our previous classes, to copy or to autofill, what we call autofill, we go down to the right corner, okay, and we see it goes from a white cross to a small black cross. And that's telling me now that I can fill in these areas here with this formula. Okay, so I'm going to go to the black cross. Okay, I'm going down to the bottom right corner. I have a black cross. I'm going to hold down my left mouse button. Okay, now I'm going to fill in all these groups. I'm going to let it go. Okay, and once again, we have the pound signs. Okay, so it's not a crisis. I'm just going to go in and adjust each column here. And this is why, too, I didn't build this spreadsheet, but when I work with a spreadsheet or develop one, I tend to make my columns pretty big, because that way then I can avoid doing this. But it takes, this is taking me maybe 20 seconds to do. So it's not a, like I said, it's not a big deal.
So we had a question, Tom. So the question
Yes,
is, so whenever we see pounds, it does not necessarily mean we've done something wrong. It means that we may have the column may be too small.
correct. Right. And that's a very good question. So I'm going to show you in a second here. When we do something incorrectly, Excel will tell you and will kind of indicate what you're doing incorrectly because Excel is very intuitive. At times it can be frustrating to work with Excel, but Excel, in a weird way wants to help you. Okay. So it's just indicating to you that all the pound signs are doing is you're not doing anything wrong. It's just telling you that the value being these numbers is too big or um, too big to fit into the column. When we do an error, it will indicate error and it will tell you what you're doing incorrectly. Okay, so let's look at these. You see in here we have C11, C12. So from here we went from B11 to B12. Okay, then I click into this formula, so it jumped ahead a row. Okay, or a column. I'm sorry. So and then here we have D11 and D12, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it indicates when you autofill, it it basically takes the original formula here, B11, B12, and then it goes to C11, D, E, F, and so on and so forth. Okay. So at times, I think next week we're going to work with something called absolute reference. When that's basically when you're telling Excel that you want one cell to hold to remain stagnant, to not jump ahead a row. And that's when if you're doing percentages, or I think we're going to look at it at the end of class today. We may hold off to next week to show you that, or next session to show you that. Okay, so let's look at these numbers real quick. Okay, so this looks correct, right? February looks great. March looks great. April looks great. May looks correct. Okay, so what's wrong with June here? Okay, so we have 0 and 2,500. That's not right. So how do we fix it? So we go into the cell, okay, and then we simply just have to hit enter, okay? So it corrects it, okay? And the same thing here. We have 0 and 2,500. Just click into the cell. Do you see where my cursor is right now? And then I hit enter, okay? And the same thing here. All right, and that should be correct. Okay, so once again, when you copy the formula, it's just you may have to go back in and do some small, quick edits like we did here, just by simply clicking return. Uh, that's a lot easier than going in manually and doing the formula for each column. Okay, so any questions about that? Is everyone clear about that? Okay, now what we're going to do, excuse me, drink some water. The office is pretty dry today. I'm going to go ahead and calculate the totals for all the expenses for me and then for my wife, or my spouse. So what I'm going to do is to do that. Hold on one second. I want to jump ahead here. Okay, give me 1 second here. I want to make sure that I'm not. Okay, didn't want to jump ahead here. Okay, so there's two different ways we can do this. So I want to calculate all this information here. So what I can do is I can type out the function. Because remember, we're working with a predefined group here. So we're working with 12 entries. So we could go in and do, what is that? B11 plus C11 plus, and that's just going to take forever to enter. So what we could do is we can create a function for that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and the total, I'm going to highlight because I want to put the amount here in the total column. It's going to highlight that cell. Okay. And then I'm going to type in equals sum. Okay. And then it comes up automatically for me. I'm going to enter a bracket to indicate to Excel we're starting the function here. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and click on B11. Okay. Then I'm going to indicate that we're doing this whole range here from B11 to M11. So I'm going to do a colon. Whoop, didn't want to do that. Give me 1 second here. To M11, okay? And see it now it's how this whole area is highlighted. So it's telling me that I want to work with this. I'm working now with this range. Let's say hypothetically, if I wanted only to add January through June or say I want to do quarterly, January through April, and I saw this highlight, that would tell me I need to adjust the cells here. But in this case, I do not. So I'm going to put a bracket at the end of that, and then I'm going to hit enter. Okay. And once again, we have the pound, which is no big deal. It's going to move it over a little bit. So my total was the income for the year was $31,000 and 500. Okay, 31,500. Okay. Now the other way we can do this, I'm going to show you here an example. Let's say what my spouse is bringing in. So the other way we can do this, we can do something called the auto sum. Okay, and this is kind of one of our, I want to say cheat ways, but this is kind of like a little trick or a tip or that we can do to make this process a little bit more efficient. So rather than entering, typing in the function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this area. So I'm going to go take a step back here. So I'm going to start with B12. I'm going to click into the cell. Okay, so I have my white cross and the green boundary over here telling me I'm working with the cell. I'm just going to left click and then highlight all of these. Okay, now what I'm going to do is go to functions. Okay, you see right here, we have our auto sum. Okay, and this is like your quick, see right here, we have sum, average, count numbers, max, and minimum. So this is basically Excel is like your basic functions you're going to use. So I'm going to click on sum. Okay, and it did it for me. Okay, so when I click into this cell here, you see it has the function written out, sum B12 through M12. Okay, it's the same thing I did there. All right, so you can do either one. You could write it out, or you could highlight it and have Excel do it for you. There's no right or wrong way. I would say when you're starting to do this, I would find it best just to write it out so you know what you're doing. I know for some people that's going to be kind of annoying, but it's kind of like once again, you think back to your math classes to when we were kids, and remember that instead of using a calculator, your teacher would make you write it out, and that the reason for that is you kind of know how the process works. So it's really up to you. Sometimes it is way more convenient just to highlight it and go to the auto sum. Sometimes I just like to write out the function. It doesn't really, there's no right or wrong way to do this. Okay, so real quick, so remember from our first class, the basics class, all these, when you're working with a Microsoft Office product, whether it be Excel like we're doing today, or PowerPoint or Word, we have a ribbon here, right? And then we have our tabs. Okay, in the case of Excel, we have a formula tab. Okay, so we looked at the auto sum. Okay, you can go to the recent used. This is if you're doing a ton. I mean, you probably wouldn't use that a whole lot. Let's say you're getting some really heavy stuff. This would show you all the formulas you've used recently. And just to give you an idea of how many formulas, excuse me, are available for you to use in Excel. I'm just going to look at these real quickly here. We can go to financial. And honestly, I don't know what half of these are. If you work a lot with accounting, these might be more familiar to you. We can go to the logical and false, not, or. I'm not going to look at these today. We can go to code, like text here, date and time, look up and reference. This is something we're going to do, I believe, next week or next session. We're going to look at the VLOOKUP. function, but that will, this is when we're working with multiple spreadsheets or worksheets, or when we're looking at, say, a massive spreadsheet and we want to look up certain information, we'd use this here. We're not going to look at it today. As I said, that's going to be one feature we're going to look at on our next session. And then we have math and trigonometry here, and then more functions. So the point is, you can see we have, I mean, there's literally, like I said at the beginning of the class, there are thousands of functions that you could use in Excel, but for the most part, what most of us are going to be using are going to be right here. Okay. So any questions about that? So once again, we can write out the total, the function by hand or type it out, or we can use the auto sum. Okay. Any questions? Okay, and then when we're finished today with this, what I'm going to do a very quick overview in Google Sheets as well too, to show you, if you don't have access to Excel, how you can do this in Google Sheets. Okay, so let's go on now to, all right. So we're going to do activity 2 real quick. I think we did that already. All right. Okay, so activity 2, so we did, yeah, did we do that already? Okay, no, we're going to go ahead and now add up our expenses for the month. Okay, so once again, either I can type it out, but I'm just going to go ahead for right now. I'm going to just highlight, and we're going to use the auto sum feature. Okay, so we had that to work here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead, just to save time, I'm going to go ahead and copy. Let me just do it one more time here. I'm going to show you how we can write it out again. So I'm going to go down to the total expenses cell. Okay. So, and then I'm going to start with B16, or sorry, C16, and then to C26. Okay. So right there, here's an example. Do you see right here? So we find a typo in your formula, try to correct it to some. Do you want to accept this correction? So when you make, as I made a mistake typing things in, do you want to accept this correction? This is telling me that I did something incorrectly, and that's why it's not working. Okay, so I'm going to hit no, and then it gives us this information here. There's a problem with this formula. So it's just telling us the stuff we already talked about at the beginning equals. Okay, so I just telling me I did this incorrectly. So I'm going to go ahead, go back in. It's not the end of the world. I'm going to go ahead and just fix it real quick by editing cell, because you see right here I had C16 through C16, so it's not, doesn't know what to do. So I'm just going to change the 16 to a 26. Okay, and you see now once again we have our area highlighted, so I know now that this part has been entered correctly, and then it's going to put the last bracket in and hit enter. Okay, so once again we could do auto sum, or we could type it out by hand. Okay, or type it out we just did there. And as I said, that was a good example, because when you make a mistake when you're typing, you just simply need to go back in and edit your formulas. Like I said, this is not the end of the world. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and once again, we're going to copy all the way through December. All right, so I'm going to click back into the cell here, go down to the right corner where I have my little black cross, and just simply go all the way through here again. Okay, and once again, so we can see it went to D16 to D26, E to E26, so on and so forth. Okay, so these do not look correct, all right, because it's basically it's giving me the same number here. And I know from looking at the numbers that this amount is not correct. So once again, just simply have to go here, hit enter, and make my correction. Sorry about that. Enter, make the correction. All right, let me try one thing here. Yeah. Okay. That didn't quite work the way I wanted it to, but that's all right. Enter. Okay. I'm going to make these numbers correct here. And like I said earlier, you do have to go in, just simply clean it up. That just takes a second to hit, click in the cell and hit enter, as opposed to going into each column here and having to either autofill or write the function out. Okay, so we have our, okay, so, and 13. Okay, so I'm going to add up, I want to add up the total here for the income at N13. So once again, I'm just going to go ahead and use the auto sum feature. So I'm going to highlight all of this, go to auto sum and hit sum. Okay, so we get 6150. That should be correct. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I'm not jumping ahead here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the totals here. I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to do auto sum. Okay, and it brings up to 1647. I'm sorry, $16,475. And I'm going to fill in, oops, 1 second here. Now I'm just going to fill in this information again. Okay, then I have to fix that real quick. Oh. Okay, now let's add up. We're going to work with this in a second here. Now I'm going to add up the total expenses. Second here. Cancel that. Just highlight this whole area here. And go to auto sum. Oh, didn't want to do it. Okay, give me 1 second here. Maybe. All right, let's try that again. That doesn't want to work today. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and do it by hand here. Let me fix that. Give me 1 second here. Oh, why is that not working? All right. All right. What is that? Be 16 through 26. Okay, there we go. All right. Now we're just going to do it by hand here. That's M26. Okay. What is going on with that? Let me try that one more time. I apologize. Should be working. Okay. Give me 1 more second here. See what's going on. Six. All right, and then okay, well, something's going on. So let's not worry about the total here, but we're gonna just to move forward here. So something's acting kind of a little funky here. We're gonna figure out the total income. So to do that, or the percent of income, So what I'm going to do is here's our total income, and I want to know, say, the percentage of what I'm paying for rent. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear that out. Okay. And I'm going to click back into here, and I'm going to put an equal, what is that? It should be N16 divided by N13. So I'm going to click on N16 divided by, okay, so 27%. And you can see here that we have our, it's already a percentage form. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this formula. Okay, and then I'm going to go back in and edit because to see what it's doing here, it's instead of dividing it by N13, it's going over to N14. So I just want to fix that real quick. Okay, so I can fix it by doing it like that way, but what I want to do is let me see if I can back up here. Okay. I'm going to try this. It didn't work the way I wanted it to when I was doing this yesterday, but we're going to well, as I said, we're going to go over absolute reference in our next class, but I just wanted to show you and see if I can get this to work. Um, I'm going to I want Excel to know that when we're dividing or creating the percentage that we're always going, this one's going to hold. It's going to be stagnant. So it's not going to move over a row when we copy it. So to do that, I'm going to put a $ in front of the N and the $ in front of the 13. Okay. Then I'm going to hit enter and it comes up to 27. Let's see if this works. Nope, didn't work. Didn't like me. Okay, so we'll deal with the absolute reference next week or next session, just to kind of move this forward. But once again, so just do this real quick here. We're going to do percent of income, and then I'm going to copy it through here. Okay, and it's going to make the change. This up here. Okay, and then I can also too just simply edit it out and then click on N13. There, give me 1 second here. And normally when you put the absolute reference thing, it should work. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. But as I said, we're going to go over that in detail in our next class. And I promise you it will work when we do it then. Okay, 3%. And then let me add up these again. Let's see if this can work for me today. And it's not working. All right, give me 1 second here. So what is it? And 16 and 26. Get the bracket in. Try it one more time here. Equals sum. 6. Okay, let me change that back to the original number, and that's second here. Take that out. Back that. Okay, and you see when I made that correction, it did adjust the number. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, and I'm going to show you Google Sheets very quickly. Right. Okay, so we're going to do activity 4. Okay, we're going to figure out, we're going to use a sum function to figure out our total income. Okay, for annual income in B3 right here. So what we're going to do in this case is going to be a straight ahead formula. We do equals because remember we're looking at these two right here. I'm going to just click it on and 11 plus, click on that one and hit enter. Okay, then we're going to make that adjustment again. Okay, so that's the same number. That's correct. Yearly expenses. Okay, give me 1 second here to fix this. Check that out. And like when things aren't working, it's easy to get flustered. Just make that correction here. Okay, I'm going to, what is that? B16 through B26. Okay. I'm going to go back over here and it should correct itself. Did not. Okay. But now we're going to add in, okay. So I'm going to find out the yearly expenses once again, and this is just kind of a review. I'm going to add up these here. So I'm going to make a function. Sum, bracket, and then what is that? B27 through M27. Oh, give me 1 second here. Sure, I'm working in the right area here. B27. Okay. So it's a little off, but then I think our numbers are off as well too. All right, so surplus cash, okay? So in B5, we're gonna look at our surplus surplus cash. So I'm gonna subtract this amount from this amount, that. So I'm gonna do a very simple formula here, equals, okay, and I click on here, and then we're gonna do our minus, okay? So you see I'm telling it to subtract 61,000 from 43,000. Oh, come on, man. Okay. It's not working for me today. Let's try it one more time. Equals. What was that? Okay. So in this case, this family would have, or this couple would have $18,000 left over, which would be pretty nice. Okay. Now we're going to do the average to find what our average expense is. So to do that, I'm going to type in equals average B27 through M27. Put the end bracket there. Okay, so our monthly average is $3,890. Our minimum, do the same thing here, equals minimum B27 through M27. Okay, and our maximum, put an equal and then max. Okay, $3,950. Okay, so any questions about what we did? Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and show you this in Google Sheets if there's no questions. And this was kind of a good example too, because sometimes when you're typing something in, it may not work the way you want it to. So you just have to make sure that you're working in the proper cell, you're putting in the proper function. And if something doesn't work out, you can always go back in and edit it. Um, so I apologize. I'm not sure why the absolute referencing was not working today. But as I said, we were going to go over that in detail in our next session. So let me show you Google Sheets real quick. I'm going to stop sharing so I can open up another window here. Give me 1 second here. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, now this is Google Sheets. Okay, and we can do the same thing. It's just gonna be a little different. So as with Excel, we can do a basic function, its basic formula. So if I wanted to add up these two, um, I can do equals and I can click on, I can type it out. If you see right here, it's guessing that I want to add up the sum, right? So I can copy that formula in, hit enter, and it gives me that amount. I can also do it by hand. Plus, what does that be? 12, hit enter. And I can do the same thing. I can enter it by hand, or I can click onto the cell, and then what's the last one here? All right. And then as we did with the copying the formula, just looks a little different in Google Sheets, and see how it's a slightly larger cross than we had in Excel. We do the same thing here. Okay. And that actually worked seamlessly. See how it did that with adding every, having to go back in to edit it. Cell here. 1 second here. Finish that out. All right. So we can do that. So it's basically the same idea. We can enter the, let me just do a function here. Let's say if you wanted to add up all these expenses. Once again, I can do it in the cell. I can do it in the formula bar. Put it equals, and once again, it's telling me it's going to kind of guess through AI what I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that. I can also enter it by hand or type it out. So we're looking at, what is that, C16. So we're going to do equals sum, like a C16 through C26. Close it out. Okay, and then how the auto sum feature works in Google Sheets is a little different. I don't want to say different, but you see here, we have our ribbon, okay, right here, this area right here. But we do have our tabs. The tabs are going to look a little different than they might in Microsoft Office. But let's say I wanted to use the auto sum feature to add up all of these. So I'm going to highlight, hold on 1 second here. Highlight the row or the column that I want to add up. Okay, and then I go to 1 second here. Then I go to insert, the insert tab, and I go to function. Okay, and then I do sum. And hit enter, and it adds it up for me. Okay, so let's go back in. I'm going to do it one more time. Go to insert. Okay, go to function. And you can see too, it's going to have pretty much all the same formulas that you would have in Excel. I'm sorry, all the same functions that you would have in Excel. We're going to have the ones that we're going to use probably the majority of the time, or sum, average, count, max, and minimum. You can go to all here. It's the same idea. The engineering, a lot of these you will never ever use. Okay, the VLOOKUP, as I said, we're going to be looking at that next week or our next session. So really, it's just a little different look, but we can do almost everything in Excel and Google Sheets. Okay, it's just just a slightly different way of doing it. It's kind of like dealing with, working on a PC and then you're working on a Mac. It's just, you have to just train your brain a little bit differently. And then, honestly, too, like I said, with Excel and Google Sheets, I think when we start looking at more advanced things, we're not going to do it in this class session. But like Excel, for example, something I'm looking at now and offering a class at the library in a few weeks, something called Power Query and Power Pivot, where you can essentially import information from other sources into Excel, scrub it and clean it. Excel can do, when we start doing more advanced things, that's when you probably want to use Excel. For our really, I don't want to say formulas and functions are basic, but we were kind of doing basic or routine things. You can go back and forth between Google Sheets and Excel. And then you may have a personal preference. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But for example, I use, when I'm doing a Word document, I find myself now, I never use Microsoft Word anymore. I use Google Docs mainly because I do have my own, we have a work account that we can use for that, so I don't worry about the storage. I also have my own personal account that I pay for. I just find it easier to use and to share. I know other people that love Microsoft Word for the same reason. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. All right, so that's kind of just an overview of formulas and functions. Like I said, a lot of the things you can do in Excel, we can do in Google Sheets. All right, so does anybody have any questions before we close out?
Well, one question was me myself personally. I still find it very hard. With 3 businesses that I do have, and also for this nonprofit, we work with trying to get the monies together. And I think the biggest challenge is, like for instance, we'll start with doing the revenues as they come in, and I think sometimes I'll be trying to figure out why can't I just put it from the beginning, and as I put the sum and the formula at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that from the top, right? So like you said, put that in. So if I'm going to do B1 plus whatever, I want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to go in there and put 335. Like if for some reason, if I want to calculate or add all the income that was coming in from donations, I would put 150, $5, $2. I want to be able to add and calculate as it goes. It does not do that. So it doesn't do that, right? So basically what I need to do is flip the way I'm thinking and just put the numbers in there, then go put the
Yeah,
formula in, and the formula will do the rest.
correct. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then when you make, and you'll see we'll see this next in our next class too, when we'll look at working with multiple spreadsheets and putting a formula in to find information from another spreadsheet. When you would say say you have your formula in to add in, like say call like C1 through C1000, right?
Mm-hmm.
You make a slight change in the amount, one of those categories, you just hit enter, go back down to the bottom, hit enter, and make the adjustment for you. So there are ways. I mean, we're not looking at today, but if we're doing adding, there are ways we can do it, and that's when we look at the absolute reference. That's one way you could do that, where it's kind of holding, say, one cell stagnant instead of adjusting. And we'll talk about that more next week too. But you can sort of, to what kind of sort of answer your question, put the numbers in, then put the formula in. But there is a way that we'll look at that next week where it can make those adjustments as you put the stuff in. So that will
Okay.
be
And
next class.
okay. And then the other question that was dropped was, um, there's no, I don't recall you showing anything about negatives. Oftentimes when you do have something and possibly say a refund, how
Mm-hmm.
does Excel or Google Sheet shows the negatives?
That's
Now,
a
with
very good.
me, I thought it was a good question because I have had the same problem. But what I do is I just take it off. I mean, because basically, if you get, for instance, let's say your business
Mhm.
orders something from, you're ordering paper from Amazon or ink from Amazon, and you
Right.
pay $23.12, and you may have put it in there, but basically, if you requested a refund, to me, it evens itself out. I used to just cause a headache trying to do a lot of negatives, negative, negative. And I just
Right.
figured if it was a full refund, I just don't even add it. But that's a really good question. So the question is, how do you reflect negatives? Does the formulas and functions, when you put that in and it shows that you had something bigger, I guess this is for the purpose of an LLC, when you're wanting to
Right.
show positive income or you're negative. Does the formulas and functions show that? And what do you put? Do you put a minus sign or what?
I would think it would be. That's a really good question. I've never had that come up before, so I can look into that and we can talk about our next class. But I would imagine it'd probably show like probably a minus. Like you would if you were writing out like working with negatives when we were like doing kids, like back in
Okay.
school. It'd probably be to show the same thing, I would think. But I've
Okay.
never dealt with that before, so that's a really good question.
Yeah. And I'll probably make sure I can try to Google it as well. I think I've seen some things when I used to do my income tax statement when I'm
Hmm.
submitting it to um I ended up getting a small business loan through one of my businesses, and they showed a parentheses, and he said the parentheses was an indication of something that was negative. So I'll look for that, and those of you who are in the class, I'll make sure that not only will I send this recording, that I'll send the information about that as well. But that was a good question.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very good question.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you, Tom. That was very, very
All right.
informative. That's the one I've been looking forward to. I know all the other ones have been great. We have talked about the basics, we've talked about charts and graphs, we've even talked about tables, but adding in the subtracting of the revenue and how to do that easily, this is the one I've been waiting on because, as I've told you before, I was actually, and when you think about, and I, for one, it's my fault because I wait to the end of the year around October trying to do my stuff, or December, and I should not. I should be actually doing it quarterly, and it makes
Hmm.
it easier to just add up 4 reports than 12. But that's my fault, and I'm getting better. But I was literally taking all of these numbers and trying to get a calculator and add it up, and then get frustrated because something wasn't adding right. And I know going across, like you did at first with the 3,500 and 6,000, where they had all the pound signs and you had to push it out. I was literally
Hmm.
adding all of those, but for some reason, the one that's coming up and down, they were not equaling. Because once you
Okay.
get to that intersection, they were equaling. So I was getting frustrated, but I probably would have saved myself a lot of time had I known how to do the formulas and functions. So I'm
Right.
excited about this part. I've never been excited about doing my quarterly estimates for my LLC, but I'm actually excited because I believe this is going to really cut my time in half. So I just want to thank you so much for the time that you've invested in teaching us this, and being very hands-on and very slow and guided in the way that you're doing it, and giving us opportunities to ask questions when we need it. So thank you so much.
Well, and you're welcome to. And as I said, I'll look into the questions you asked about. Can you, you say put information, kind of add it. We can talk about that next week. But I say definitely to next week. Definitely attend the class next week because we're going to go through some really kind of valuable information that should help you a lot too when you're working with multiple spreadsheets.
Okay. And it's not next week, it's the week after. So we have these
Right.
classes
Two.
every 2 weeks. And I know we always
Right.
say next week, but we have 2 more classes, y'all. So the next session is session 6, and it's going to be advanced topics. And that's one of the topics that Tom, what was that word you mentioned earlier, Tom?
VLOOKUP.
No, you said something about we'll talk about that next week. You've said it a couple
Oh
times.
yeah. So the apps was called absolute reference.
Absolute reference. So that's we're going to be covering advanced topics, and that's June 14th. And then the last session is session 7, and it will be June 28th. And that will be on getting all of the information that Tom has taught us, and he's going to show us how to actually create our document. So we're looking forward to having you join us. Again, we will send this recording out, as well as any notes or highlights for this, as well as some information about how to use the negatives or the report negatives. And so we don't have any other questions. We'd like to again thank you, because getting up on a Saturday morning, especially if you didn't have to, take some time, and we really appreciate your dedication and your commitment, not only to yourselves and your business, but through supporting us as well. Thank you all so very much, and
All right.
have a
Thank you for
great
your time.
Saturday.
All right.